got a little over an hour, and we're going to get into some nuts and bolts and some meat, all right? Well, we've got the meat. Now we're going to put the bread on each side of the meat. The meat is the gospel, right? I'm going to stop talking about that because I'm blabbering, and it's going to turn into some awkward illustration about meat and sandwiches. So, how? So we talked about the why. I want us to talk about how, and I'm going to backtrack just a minute. This is a parrot. So here's the story of the parrot. This is the St. Lucian parrot. It's native to the island of St. Lucia, tropical bird. Only St. Lucia has this parrot. Now here's the problem with this parrot. In the late 70s, this parrot was on the brink of extinction. So a brilliant London college student decided that he's going to move to the island of St. Lucia and do research on this parrot, and his thesis project is going to be how to save this bird from becoming extinct. I say brilliant not because of the work he did, but because he's a college student that decided, I'm going to do my graduate work on a tropical island, right? So brilliant kid, smart kid. So he moves to St. Lucia, spends about 6 months investigating and researching what's the root cause of the extinction problem, and presents some solutions to the government. 3 solutions he presents in the late 70s. Harsher punishment for those who mistreat the animal. Create a bird sanctuary where they can live and thrive in a protected environment. And number 3, build out a tourism industry where part of the money goes into the revitalization efforts of not just the St. Lucia parrot, but other parts of the island. 3 solutions that he proposes. The government says, fantastic, we love them. The problem is that all of those require legislative change. So we need the people to actually vote to change those laws. So now his focus has shifted from governmental solutions to motivating the people. So he says, easy, no problem, I'm going to get the people on board. Well, he quickly finds out some very real and hard things about the people of St. Lucia. Number 1, they didn't even know that this bird existed. Number 2, they certainly don't care that it's on the brink of extinction. And number 3, their fundamental question was, what difference does it make to us if this bird lives or dies? So he realizes very quickly that his motivation for them, his approach to them is not going to be data-driven. Did you know that we have this bird? Did you know it's only our bird? Did you know there's less than 100 left? People said, don't care. How does it affect us? Doesn't really bother us. He shifts his tactics from data-driven to emotionally driven. And he decides that he wants to create a campaign that's going to motivate the people of St. Lucia around this idea. We are St. Lucians, and we take care of our own. He shifts from a data-driven approach to an identity-driven approach. Identity says, who are we? We are St. Lucians. What do? We take care of our own. Okay, now, one of our own is in trouble. It's on the brink of extinction. So he develops this whole social campaign, bumper stickers, billboards, cards. He goes to ministers and says, hey, preach on the stewarding well what God's entrusted to you, and use the parrot as an illustration for your people. Because we want to begin to form in them an identity that we are St. Lucians. We take pride in that. And one of the things that St. Lucians do is that when one of our own is in trouble, we take care of it. So after 6 months of this campaign, they pass all 3 laws. Success. If you go to the island of St. Lucia, it's become this national icon on the island this parrot has. I think for research purposes, I need to go and actually verify what I read in this study. That would probably be wise stewardship on my part to go and identify that. But here's the point of the story, is that this college student tapped into the power of identity. Identity-based motivation and identity-based thinking. Who are we? We are St. Lucians. What do? We take care of our own. What kind of situation is this? One of our own is in trouble. And so we step in and we do something. See, generally speaking, our people in our churches are operating through one of 2 lanes of decision making. And for the most part, the vast majority of our people, even in our church context, are making decisions through what we can call the outcome-oriented pipeline. See, outcomes are not bad things to consider, but they're not ultimate things to consider. The conversation doesn't end with the outcomes. Outcomes ask questions like this. It counts the personal costs. So what does that mean? It means, what's it going to cost me if I eat that extra piece of cake? Or if I stay up and binge watch another 3 episodes of This Is Us to get caught up, right? Or big things like move my family across the country, take a new job. Like, what's it going to cost me? What's it going to require of me? These are important questions, okay? Important considerations. It makes decisions ultimately that will maximize our personal satisfaction. That's the lens through which humans are naturally wired to think. What decision can I make that will maximize my personal satisfaction and minimize my personal inconvenience? That's how our people think, even our Christian people. Okay? And it asks questions like these. What will it require of me? How will it make me feel? What are the long-term effects for me? This is outcome-oriented thinking. This college student and the Bible constructs this whole new paradigm of thinking that we can call identity. And instead of counting our personal costs, it also counts the cost to others. What's it going to cost me if I do? But what's it going to cost them if I don't? So again, asking what's it going to cost me if I do, it's not a bad question. It's just not the ultimate question. It's a basis from which we then begin to ask more varsity level questions. Okay? It doesn't just make decisions that will maximize personal satisfaction. We make decisions that will maximize the benefit to others, even at our own personal cost. It asks questions like, who am I? What kind of situation is this? And what does someone like me do in a situation like this? See, I want to raise my girls to be at a party one day. Not that I want them to be at the party, but I probably can't prevent it. One of them is going to end up at a party when they're 16. And one of them is going to be offered the opportunity to drink. And in that moment, they have a decision to make. No, I'm not going to drink because I'm afraid of getting caught. It's outcome. Or, you know what, maybe I can do it and I can get away with it. That's outcome. Instead, I want them in that moment to be so empowered in a personal sense of identity that even subconsciously the way that they're thinking is this. Who am I? Well, I'm the kind of person that doesn't do that. What kind of situation is this? A situation where I'm being offered the opportunity to do something that someone like me doesn't do. So what do I do in a situation like this? I don't. Not because I'm afraid of getting caught, but because that's just not the kind of girl that I am. That's an identity-informed approach. The vast majority of people in our churches, and let's just be real and honest here, this is a safe place. Our churches are filled with people that operate in the outcome-oriented lane as the ultimate lane. And the gospel begins to infuse something entirely different in there, a new way of thinking. It changes the way that we think. It says, I'm going to count the cost that I will incur. I'm also going to count the cost that they will incur if I don't. I'm going to willingly lay down my life for the benefit of others. Who am I? Well, I'm someone that when I see brokenness, I lean into it and I step into it. What kind of situation is this? It's a broken one. What does someone like me do in a situation like this? I step into it and I lean into it. I count the costs. The rose, premarital counseling. What's the goal? I live in a college town with 75,000 college kids, and every one of them want to graduate married, for the most part. That's a generalized statement, but especially in our church. I gotta leave engaged at least, right? We call it the MRS degree and the MR degree, right? And so my wife and I do a lot of premarital counseling with students, and I tell them up front, whatever rose-colored lenses you have on right now, my goal over the next few months is to take them off, shatter them into a million pieces in front of you, but give you a new set of lenses that's even better to look through. You think the lenses you're looking through right now are good? We've got even better ones for you. And it includes counting the costs. But it doesn't end there, right? It says, gosh, we count these costs as worth it. We have a whole new paradigm of the way that we think. With our people, we don't want to say it's wrong of you to count the cost. No, it's important for you to count the cost. But it's also important that your conversation doesn't end there. It carries us into something more varsity level, bigger and more broad and more important. So we want to take the rose-colored lenses off, but we want to reconstruct the lenses through which they're thinking. Outcomes versus identity. Inform this gospel identity. There's your sweater again. We're going to skip over that. So how do we do that? All right, how? We're going to move quick. Here's our why, and now here's the how. The how is not what. The how is not step 1, step 2, step 3. The how is our posture and our approach and the mindset and the philosophy through which we think through this thing. And so we're going to dive into that. 3 ingredients of a movement. We want to effectively create movement in our church. We want to move people from one place to another, people collectively as a whole, not individually isolated, but we want to move our church. And research suggests that there are 3 primary elements to an effective and sustainable movement. The first one is shrinking the problem. Second is grow the people. So make the problem smaller and your people feel bigger. And then provide clarity. Chart the path. The more increased clarity decreases anxiety. Okay? If I land in Seattle last night at 1 a.m., I don't know where I am, but thank God for Siri. Because Siri increases clarity on how to get to the hotel, and so it decreases my anxiety. Okay? That's what we want to do for our people. So number 1, shrink the problem. I'll just start with this. Chick-fil-A. You got Chick-fil-A, right? Now you do. Actually, I think when I was at Reach Church, it had just opened, right around then, and literally the highway was backed up. So we have 7 in our town. We have 150,000 people in our town. We have 7 Chick-fil-A's. All day long, every one of them, the line is wrapped around the building, 2:30 in the afternoon. What are you people eating at 2:30 in the afternoon, right? That's Chick-fil-A, God's Chicken. That's the play date place when it's raining. That's where every guy I know has a Chick-fil-A budget for their family. So Chick-fil-A, here's the deal. The number 1 value meal is about 1,050 calories, which is a lot if you're a calorie person. That's a lot. I know this because a good friend of mine just became an operator. I got to go and be a part of his induction ceremony, which was actually a really cool deal. It's like a church service. I mean, legit Christian organization, praying over him, worshiping. Chick-fil-A just had their annual leadership operators conference. They all got together. Shane and Shane led worship. It's a legit deal. So we pray over him, we speak over him, and one of the corporate guys says, we don't sell sandwiches, we sell experiences, which is basically every company's tagline. We don't sell copy paper, we sell office experiences. Okay. But that's what he says, and he says, here's the irony, that 70-something% of their annual revenue comes from the number 1 value meal, the sandwich, the medium fries, medium drink. Well, here's what's crazy about that, is that that's one of the most unhealthy items on the menu. And so here's what that suggests to us, is that people, for the sake of, again, going to outcomes, for the sake of my own personal satisfaction, I'm going to eat unhealthy things because it's just so darn good, right? And I'm going to sit in a drive-through line at 2:30 in the afternoon, wrapped around the building and up the highway, just to do that, okay? And Chick-fil-A is going to make most of their money off of my psychology, which says, I will discard data for the sake of personal satisfaction. So if you came to me and said, Jason, I want to lose 15 pounds, help me lose 15 pounds, I'd say, what do you eat every day? You say, every day at 2:30, I wait in line, I get a number 1 value meal. I'd say, let's start there, right? That's 1,050 calories. You'd say, yeah, but what's a calorie really? Have you ever seen one, felt one, touched one, smelled one, experienced one, held one in your hand? No. They're just these invisible kind of evil things that are thrown out in front of us, these are really bad. Really? I've never seen them, felt them. I have no human experience with it. And now you're telling me that there's 1,000 of them and that's a lot? I have no frame of reference for that. Let me tell you what happens when we stand in front of our people and say, there's 153 million orphans in the world. They go, man, I've never seen one, smelled one, tasted one. I kind of know that they're there, but gosh, that just sounds like a lot. And here's what human psychology says. I am totally willing to discard legitimate data for the sake of my own personal satisfaction. Okay? There's thousands of kids in Washington, hundreds in Seattle. Okay, I think I can push that aside for the sake of my own personal satisfaction. Now, it's important for us to shrink the problem. Here's what I mean by that. The equivalent of eating a number 1 value Chick-fil-A meal, calorie-wise, is the same as eating 4 Snickers bars for lunch. I've never met anybody that eats 4 Snickers bars for lunch. It's kind of gross. Maybe 1 after, maybe 2 if you're pushing it, but 4 Snickers bars for lunch is gross. We can all agree on that, okay? Calorie-wise, it's the exact same. But here's what we've done, is we've gone from 1,050 to 4. And you can feel them, touch them. You've had an experience with a Snickers bar or some candy bar. Everybody has at some point in their life. I can literally hold them in my hand. Now, we've shrunk the problem in such a way. We haven't minimized it. We haven't excused it. We haven't dumbed it down. We've just shrunk it into a way that people can relate to it. And when you're able to, when people can relate to data, it is exponentially more difficult for them to discard its implications. I can't touch or hold or feel 153 million orphans. But when you start telling me that everybody can do something for one, I can't get myself out of that corner. I cannot discard that. We need to be really diligent in our messaging about shrinking the problem. Not only individually for our people that they can have a human experience with and they can't discard so easily, but also in our ministries as a whole. We want to shrink the problem, not dumb it down, not minimize it, but make it more tangible and applicable for our people. 3 principles to shrinking the problem for starting and sustaining well. Number 1 is start simple. Start simple. Research suggests that the more options you give people for anything, the less likely they are to choose anything at all. So we tell our kids, what do you want for dinner? And what do we get? All these different answers, right? Okay, we're going to have chicken grilled or chicken fried, right? Now, they're still going to argue, but at least we've minimized the options for them. Here's 470 different ways to serve in our church. Church leaders, what happens when we make announcements like that? Literally nobody signs up to serve, okay? All right, here's the one right now. And we need 9 people right now. Can we knock out 9 people right now? Yeah, simplify the messaging. Simplify. It means we're not going to try to do everything all at once. We're only going to do a few things, and we're going to do a few things really well. So you might sit down with your leadership and say, what are the 3 things that we can do in the next 0 to 6 months? What are the 3 things that we can't do until the next 6 to 12 months? What are the 3 things that we want to do, but that's maybe 12 to 24 months from now? So we have to have the ability to say yes to good ideas and to say no to good ideas and to say no to the loudest person in the room and be okay with it. And to say no to the biggest, not checkbook in the room anymore because nobody uses those, the biggest debit card in the room, right? The biggest cash app in the room. We have to be willing to say no to good ideas and to loud voices if it's something that, gosh, we just can't do that right now. It's too complicated for us. It would overcomplicate things. Be simple. Do a few things really well. Start slow. Again, the goal is not speed. The goal is sustainability. The goal is not speed. The goal is sustainability. Start slow. Now, let me be clear. It's entirely possible to be simple but not slow. We can do a few things way too fast. Part of leadership is being willing to recognize where our people are and take 2 steps back so that they can take 1 step forward. I heard it said the other day, he said, look, it's like if I'm walking down a trail in the woods, if my leader is right in front of me and my teammates are right beside me or right behind me, but if my leader gets too far out in front of me, it's easy for me to mistake him as the enemy and shoot him. Does it make sense? So I just got done watching, finally, Band of Brothers. If you watched it, like 15 years ago when it came out. I finally just watched it, and you can't watch Band of Brothers without thinking of them. In those environments, in the chaos, if somebody's too far from you and where you need to be and where you expect them to be, it's easy to mistake them as the enemy and just shoot them in the back. Sometimes leaders get too far out in front of their people that we inadvertently, we don't become enemies to our people, but we build this chasm between us. So let's stay where our people are. Again, it's a stewardship issue. Our goal is not to get people moving as fast as we can. Our goal is to steward well where God has them as best as we can. The success of your ministry is not determined by the size of your ministry. It's determined by how well you are stewarding the people in your ministry. You might look at one church and say, gosh, they're doing so much, and they've got 100 families involved, and blah, 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 blah. I wish we were like that. No. Turn around and look at the people that God's given you, and let the metric of your success not be determined by the size or the speed, but by how well are we serving them and meeting them where they are. That's our success. Slow, not speed. And then finally, start small. Again, it's not size, it's stewardship. Start small. The best things, the things that we appreciate the most in life have often started the smallest. Our young church plants, our babies, right? They peed on themselves and threw up and kept us up at night, but eventually they stopped doing that. And everyone said, you're going to miss it when it's gone, you're going to miss it. No, miss this? No way. Do we look at old videos of them now when they're just learning how to walk and miss it? Yeah. So it goes fast. So be aggressive about being slow and enjoying where you are and not just wishing that you were somewhere else all of the time. Let's just steward well where we are. We were going to have cards for you, download cards for you, but there's a free resource, again, on the blog. I hate that word. But it's there, and it's a free ebook that unpacks these 3 principles in great, great detail at jasonjohnsonblog.com about starting slow, starting simple, starting small. So we want to shrink the problem, make it tangible and relatable, nearly impossible for our people to discard. And then we want to grow our people. Let's make this problem smaller and our people bigger. We've already talked about that. How do we grow our people? Discipleship. 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 Community. If there are two pillars to this whole thing, it would be community and gospel. Community and gospel. Any way that you can possibly find excuses to connect people with other people, do it. Do it. Because we have to continually reinforce the idea, not only theologically, that it requires the body of Christ, ears and eyes and hands, but also just practically. You cannot do this alone. So grow the people. We've talked ad nauseum about that. And so let's move to the third. Shrink the problem, grow our people, and then chart the path. Chart the path forward. What does that look like? I'm going to have Jessica come up. Does that work? Is that good? Is she here?
She might have just stepped out.
She literally just stepped out. It's like she saw the reflection of her picture in my eyeballs and I'm out of here. All right. Then we're going to have her come up in a minute. So let's talk about charting the path. What does this look like? All right, here's the why, here's the how, the posture in which we do this. And now, what does this look like for us? All right, we've said this already. The goal is not to make caring for the orphan and the vulnerable a special thing in our church, as much as it is to make it a normal thing in our church. So let's talk about ideas, principles of normalcy. So it's either an urban legend or a real story. There's arguments on the research about it, but either way I say it's a good story. I'm just going to pretend like it's true, no matter what. So here's the story. In the late 70s, University of California, Irvine was expanding their campus, and they hired an architect who was a very forward-thinking architect, a creative. And he said, here's my plan. We're going to design the site plan and build all the buildings, but we're not going to install the sidewalks or the landscaping until 6 months later. And his thinking was to test the theory of the path of least resistance. Again, when we operate in an outcomes paradigm of thinking, we're always looking for the path of least resistance. What's going to maximize my satisfaction best? We see it all the time. If you've been to a park and there's a sidewalk that goes around the field, but there's a trail that people have cut right across the field. What's the fastest way from point A to point B? As humans, we're wired to find it. That's going to create the least resistance for us. So he puts this to the test. Builds the buildings, doesn't install sidewalks until 6 months later. And what he's done is he's given the students 6 months to chart their own course. He's going to let them determine what's the fastest path from point A to point B from building to building. And then 6 months later, he's going to identify where they're already walking and come back and lay some foundation there. Here's the principle for us. Leadership isn't always laying foundation and telling people to walk. Leadership, I have found, is most often in the church context, stewardship of our people, identifying where are our people already walking and how can we begin to lay some ministry foundation there. and create a sense of normalcy. You're already doing this. It's already normal for you. Not only as an individual, but maybe even as a church. Where are we as a church already walking? Programmatically, ministry-wise. And how can we begin to lay some real practical foundation there? If I were to go to my church and say, the voice of God woke me in the middle of the night and spoke this revelation to me, and so I now share it with you, church leaders, pastors of mine. We need to start, as part of our foster care and adoption ministry, we need to start an interpretive dancing component of that in our church. Now, look, if you have interpretive dancing at your church, I'd love to come visit and see how that works. That's just not our church, okay? That's just not our church. Our church's fault is that we are Bible, cerebral, academic, boring. That's our church's problem. Like the exact opposite of a church that has interpretive dancing, okay? Our pastors would probably look at me and say, Jason, that was not the voice of God. That was actually the voice of Satan himself. That's not God, right? That's not helpful to us. In part because that's just not who we are. It's not a normal part of our culture. If we stood up on stage and said, hey, we're starting an interpretive dancing ministry, our people would go, what? That's weird. Yeah, it is weird. But if we stood up on our stage and said, hey, we're going to launch some new small groups or some new Sunday school classes that are gathering people around us, they'd say, yeah, that's normal. Because we hear about those things all the time. Our church is already walking in those spaces. And so let's lay some foundation there. So part of your task is maybe to write down for discussion, where is our church already walking? And we're going to look at this in a minute. And how can we lay some strategic foundation there? Here's what's likely true, is that your church, you likely already have many of the components that you need to do this ministry well. You likely don't have to start a whole lot of new. Your church is likely already walking in some spaces that you just simply need to come and lay some foundation on. It's not a matter of all the new things that we need to start. It's a matter of identifying what are we already doing and how can we bring that into a uniformed purpose to this end. So I want to take 5 minutes and hear from, is she back in the room now? You left us right in the moment. Jessica, to share a little bit about her work and what she does for the next 5 minutes, and then we're gonna land the plane with a lot of information.